in the social agency studio, we had to design a kind of cultural hub, which references the struggle of Aboriginal people in Australia, and we would have had to present it via a normal pin-up, but due to coronavirus, as I'm sure with everybody else, we had to resort to different means. So in the end, we had to do a 5-minute video, which we would pre-record, and then we would present that video in a Zoom meeting, and then we'd have like 15 minutes of feedback. And I kind of noticed that most people were adopting the strategies that they would use for a typical physical pinup, and that in this situation, maybe the better way would be to kind of go towards a more video-oriented approach. And so DaVinci Resolve is kind of like a slightly advanced video editing program. Maybe some of you might have heard of Adobe Premiere or Final Cut Pro, and DaVinci is a similar tool, but it's a bit more user-friendly. So I used it to kind of make the transitions between my drawings a bit more seamless, to kind of support more of a storytelling kind of strategy for the presentation. And I also used it to be able to get like one drawing of, say, your site plan, where instead of having multiple drawings, you could zoom into certain parts of your site plan to focus on what you were talking about at the time. Yeah. But yeah, if you want to play it now, Dave, you can see what I came up with.
Sure.
I'd like to start by acknowledging the Kumbayanga people, who are the traditional custodians of the land which I present from, as well as the people of the Eora Nation, including the Gadigal, Wongal and Camaragal clans, whose land gives host to our proposals. The live contextual brief which we were given, maybe heard there was a lot of painful words in there, but it was also a lot of optimism imbued within it. I tried to understand how this could be shaped into not just an architecture, but also an event. I was really drawn to the idea of protesting because I'm not really telling them what to do. I'm more so suggesting a place that facilitates an event which the people who attend the event decide on the outcome of. So I'll start with the event, which is a continuation of the existing bridge walk and will return every year. My proposal, as I said, does not dictate the topic for the event. It facilitates a place to make it possible by providing a space and the resources to create an architecture of protest. To get to this point, I explored some of the feelings that were imbued within the Uluru Statement and try to understand how they could be reproduced in a tangible manner. It was the exploration of all of them that really helped to shape my understanding of the brief and my overall response. When analysing the site, a couple of things stood out to me, such as the existing amenities and the fence that goes around the observatory. And I also looked at high use, medium use, low use areas, views from the highway leading to the harbour bridge, the pedestrian path of people visiting the site, and understood the areas which are already covered by trees. In response to this analysis, I gave myself a brief which comprised of 3 key criteria. Much like a protest, the site has artefacts from different backgrounds, from different periods of life. My proposal suggests to unify those in various ways to reflect the future program of the site. The first of which is the Boer War Memorial, which is surrounded by very harsh, unconsiderate concrete, and I propose to add some garden beds and steps to create a better place for people to relax. Next is the Rotunda, which is sitting quite high at the moment and isn't really accessible to everybody. So lowering it so that anybody can access it. The third, there's a few nice stone fences, but there's also unconsidered timber ones. The idea would be to remove those and replace them with new stone fences that serve as a fence, but also viewpoints and seating opportunities too. The construction of a landmark on the eastern area of the site has got a dramatic form, which is derived from the exploratory study of harmony. For those passing by on the freeway, it will generate a sense of curiosity, and I hope it will give them a desire to find out more about the site and come to it. The relatively flat and clear areas nearby serve as ideal earthscapes for the preparation of protest materials. I thought it would be better to use a lawn rather than by specifying tables, because I didn't really want to dictate the size or output of any of those protest materials. There's more of an outdoor living structure rather than a typical building. And on a pedestrian level, it's a hub containing amenities for food preparation, which can be accessed by anybody at any time of the day as they wish, including on the day of the protest. I thought that it was important to provide such a space because it really builds upon the existing program as a picnic and viewpoint. It will serve as a meeting place for the annual Bridge Walk as well. After the Bridge Walk, the banners are to be repurposed and can be used for picnic mats or stored to be used for other events. I'm going to explain how that works here. Finally, we have the library and amenities block, which uses the southwestern corner of the site near the Agar Steps. In terms of the amenities, it provides not only toilets, but also showers and washing facilities to give everybody a reason to come to the site and feel welcome. Being somewhat homeless myself, I understand the difference that having these kind of facilities has in making you feel like you're free to come or excluded from a site. Resting on these pillars of central human function, a library of sorts, which, it doesn't only serve as a critical aspect of a form derived from community, which is the interlocking blocks which rely on each other to stand up, but it's also a place where people can access the banners at any time and any day of the year. Whether they use them as a picnic mat or they take them to another protest, the choice is up to them. And naturally, some items will not be returned, and that's fine because this is not a formal traditional library undergirded by rules and regulations, but it is rather a living library that will change and adapt according to what is relevant to that point in time as the users of the site shape their own history with their protests.
Cool. Thanks, Dave. So as you can see, it's I think one of the biggest challenges that you'll find during architecture school is finding a way to kind of narrow down the information that you have and presenting that to the audience that you're presenting to. I know that I've done this a lot where I've presented at my crit, and I have all these wonderful ideas in my head, but I end up failing to communicate them, because I've got too many drawings or like I stumbled during my speech or something. So by utilizing video instead of doing a traditional pinup, it can be very powerful because you can focus the viewer's attention to exactly what you want. And you'll see that, for example, if you go to the floor plan, I think the second one, GF plan with context. So like I went from the site plan and then I zoomed into this ground floor plan with a bit of context, because I wanted to show where this particular structure was on the site. And then if we move to the next slide, I wanted to stop talking about the context, and then I wanted to start talking about what was actually contained within the ground floor plan. So I took out all the context and then went to this image, and then using the video editing program, I was able to zoom in on the areas which I was talking about. On the video that we saw on YouTube as well, you could see how when I was talking about different parts of the project, because there was kind of 3 distinct areas, I would introduce the location of it and the meaning of it, and then I would go back to my kind of process for that. So for this item, which is the library of the site, Dave, if you want to go to 7 sketch. This is funny. So I talked about how the form of what I'm proposing is derived from a sketch I'd done earlier. So this is the sketch that I did probably in like, I don't know, week 3 or 4 or something when I was exploring different forms. And so if you go on to the next slide, Dave, I said that, I did this sketch, and then this is how the sketch is translated into a built form. And then if you go to the next one, Dave, then I kind of shaded it in to show like a bit of materiality, and kind of left it a bit vague, so to create a bit of a sense of curiosity for the viewer, so they can be like, oh, I wonder what colors those materials are going to be. And then next, you can you'll be able to, you can see the materials are kind of properly rendered here, and you see the building is an empty shell without the function. And then the next one shows that I had proposed for this particular building to be a library of sorts where people would hang protest materials like banners. But not only did I want to show that they could hang their banners here, I also wanted to show that the users could shape the history of this building over time. So yeah, if you go to the next one, please. By fading in and out between this image and the last one, I was able to kind of recreate the the illusion of movement and the building adapting and changing over time. And look, I'm sure you could do like a animation in Lumion or something like that, but this is like super easy. You just do one kind of render in Photoshop, and then you move your entourage around a little bit, save again, move your entourage again, save again, and then transition between those few clips. And yeah, I felt it was a pretty effective way of showing how the building can change over time. In the video as well, you would have seen during the site analysis and response, I was able to kind of grey out different parts of my sketch analysis, and I also had a refined analysis on the right-hand side, and I was able to grey out and highlight the different areas that I was talking about to guide the viewer's attention to where I wanted it, which is really useful because obviously it gets them to to focus on what you want them to focus to, but it also means that you can probably spit out information a lot quicker than you could during a normal prezzo, because during a normal pin-up presentation, the viewer would have to find by themselves what you're talking about and kind of take a few seconds for their brain to digest that. Yeah. Yeah, and if you, for this video, obviously this is a very basic and rough animation, which I just did during SketchUp. And the point of this is, I think in Masters, like it's a lot less about doing fancy fancy renders with like really detailed everything, but it's more about communicating what you want to communicate, what's important to your design. And the reason that I used this animation from SketchUp was to go from the section, so 05 section, I wanted to show them that, look, this is my building, and then this building, you go to the SketchUp transition.
My proposal is like,
it's towards the end. I think it's like 420, maybe. Yeah. Yeah, it kind of shows how one part of the building can relate to another part. And that kind of enables the viewer to kind of piece together what you're talking about quite easily. Yeah, so yeah, that's kind of it. Yeah, and I guess with this section, like, it's cool because you can kind of like build up your drawing as you talk about it. So like, you've got the picture of the location on the site that you're talking about, and then you kind of fade out the picture to emphasize the point that you're talking about and transition that into your drawing, fill in your drawing, etc. And yeah, it's really good to support a kind of storytelling of your project. I think it was also a really useful exercise for me that will kind of translate into my future presentations, whether they be videos or pinups. Because whenever you do a pinup, you should also be looking at your presentation as a kind of timeline that you can walk through. So yeah, if you have any questions about this studio or this presentation or anything masters related that you want to talk to me about, please go for it. Open to any questions.
So, why did you choose the social agency stream for masters out of all the other streams?
So when I did my undergraduate degree at Deakin, and I didn't like I did enjoy it, but I was also kind of a bit annoyed that it didn't really touch on any kind of issues that seemed relevant to me. And I ended up kind of traveling around Asia a lot and working at a social enterprise in Myanmar. And it really kind of reshaped my perception of what architecture was, and that you can kind of do architecture for a good cause. So after that, I kind of came back to Australia and it was time to choose my master's program. And I knew that I wanted to do something that was a bit more people focused. And UNSW was the only university that I saw that actually kind of recognized such a thing. Yeah, so that's why I chose it. And I mean, it's my first term, but I've really enjoyed it so far, and it's a very different way of doing architecture, which for some people, in my class they found it very difficult, but for me it's exactly what I want to do.
So I guess I'll ask another question. I know I'm in the ODs and I'm only in first year, so they haven't really had much time to really get strict on the constructions. But that forum was really interesting for
Yeah. Oh, thanks.
yeah, and for social agency project too, it was it's very interesting and surprising. Um, how how much did they nail you down for that? Like, do you actually have to show the physics behind that?
Nah, like when you're doing masters, they kind of assume that you know like the basics about construction and all that kind of stuff. The most important thing in masters is kind of communicating who you want to be as an architect, and kind of creating a convincing narrative, because anybody can do technical drawings and all that kind of other stuff in architecture. Anybody can do that, but to create a narrative or a real connection or a real understanding of the context you're designing for is a lot more difficult, and that's what they're interested in. That being said, yes, if you propose a building which does not make sense, they they will get very angry at you. But there's certain things which, even though I didn't talk about anything structural in that project, all of my drawings were like in the last axonometric drawing, all the panels on the wall were at 600 centers. There were a few bearers and joists visible. The roof thicknesses, they were all realistic. And there are some people, for example, somebody showed a project that had I think it was like a 3-meter deep concrete slab. And that person got torn apart because like obviously that just does not exist. So, you have to be reasonable, but you don't really have to talk about it because you'll already be communicating it consciously in a way, or you should be. Good question.
Kieran, I really enjoyed that presentation. It was really, I thought it was great.
Oh, thank you.
What were some of the other, like, what, compared to like the other presentations that you saw, what were some of the other ideas that surprised you in the other presentations? Were there any that surprised you?
Kind of difficult to say because I do pay a lot of attention to everybody else's projects. So, I mean, because of that, nothing was really surprised. But it was very interesting how everybody handled the brief. Because it's very difficult because we are told in a studio environment to design something for somebody. But in social agency, many people, including myself, have the belief that you can't design for other people, you design with other people. And especially when we're talking about the First Nations people of Australia, very touchy subject. So, yeah, it was interesting how people approached it. Like, for me, I chose to propose an architecture which facilitated protesting because I felt that during a protest, it's up to the people in that protest to decide what they want to do. So that was my way of, how do you say, like, not telling people what to do, basically. But other people had different methods. Like they would, somebody proposed a vegetable garden, or not vegetable garden, but like a food garden using traditional indigenous plants. That was more of like an educational tool. Other people did kind of more kind of visceral kind of museums and art galleries. Yeah. And it was also quite interesting how pretty much every student harnessed the site in a different way. Somebody proposed a fence and a bathroom, and that was it. Yeah. And then somebody else proposed like a 3-story, I don't know, 600 square meter cultural center, which is massive, like, absolutely huge. So, but yet all of those projects were pretty valid and quite good, I would say. So, yeah, it's pretty awesome to see the variety.
Do you get to see some of the other streams that you didn't choose?
No, not usually. Like when it's in person, I'd like to walk around and check them out in person. But we did. I created like a Facebook group for my year level and asked people to share their videos. So I did get to see a few, probably like 6 or 7 of other streams. Totally different. Totally different. Yeah. For us, we were doing a very small site with a very personal brief. Urban conditions, they had like a master plan for like, something similar to like Sydney Olympic Park. And then for the housing studio, they had to do like, I don't know, 50 apartments or something like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I can't remember. I don't think I saw any of the high performance ones. Yeah. But yeah, totally different.
Wow.
Yeah.
Go on.
How's it compared to a kind of first year studio, Dave?
I've got a few first years here as well. If you guys want to back me up.
Yeah.
But I thought Studio One was just fun. It was just highly experimental because I remember Russell told us that they didn't want to tell us how to make architecture. They wanted to make the best architects out of us and what we already liked, and that kind of related to the start of the course. They asked us what our best piece of creative work was, and who was an architect we really aspired towards. And yeah, I just do crazy shit. Like I made it and I showed my engineering friends and they're like, yeah, you can't make this in real life. But it was kind of the point. Like I had this pavilion that split open and I chose yeah. It was just a lot of fun and I'm excited to see how it changes over time.
Yeah.
I guess in first year you can have fun like now. We don't have to be serious yet. We can be fun now, and then later we have to make sense.
Yeah, and from what I've heard, as we start learning about construction structures and science, and we're gonna have to like start relating that to our studio work. So I guess more technical, and more limiting, but it's still architecture at the end of the day, and fun. It's enjoyable.
Yeah, it's a really cool kind of challenge when you create something that's not buildable, and then you have to kind of like pare it back to actually be buildable. And often you'll find that even though you're not going to actually build the projects that you propose in studio, that if you do go through the process to make them realistic, the construction will actually create a really beautiful architecture in a lot of circumstances.
Yeah.
Especially sometimes when you make logical sense of it and you add construction intricacies, it just looks complete as well.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Details.
Do you need to do any environmental have any environmental considerations in masters, like as with materials and stuff?
Like for the studio submissions?
Yeah, for any of the submissions, like do you have to consider that?
Yeah, you do, but it depends on your design, I guess. For mine, I didn't talk about materials at all. But even though I do know about materials and I have a good idea of what materials I would use for that project, I didn't need to talk about them because, like, I had a kind of strong concept, and based on my concept, one could assume that I would be using a certain kind of material, and those materials would be, sustainable.
Yeah.
But so for social agency, I guess the message is the most important part, or the way in which it relates to people. But yeah, if you were doing high performance, you would have to talk about almost exclusively about materials.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do ask you about stuff along the way, and they want to make sure that you're thinking about materials and also every other aspect as well. Yeah, but I guess they're kind of familiar with you during the term to know that you've thought it through. Yeah. Although you do get a few people getting asked in the last few weeks, like, what are you going to build this out of? And they're like, crap, I haven't thought about that. Still happens. Good questions. Also, if you don't feel comfortable like asking a question on camera, you can chuck it into the chat as well. I guess woohoo's not really a question, hey? Yeah.
Guys, when the stream's over, feel free to stay and we can just chat, I guess. The terms coming up, it's just been the holidays.
Oh, thanks, Ivy. Yeah. Yeah, sorry about the technical difficulties as well, but
yeah,
hopefully that was all right.
Have you used DaVinci before?
Me?
Yeah. Had you used it a lot, like before? Sorry, I forgot if you'd mentioned that.
I didn't.
Why did you use it instead of like any of the Adobe ones? Because it was you knew it was user friendly?
No, I've actually got a bit of a I don't know, grudge against Adobe, I guess. I used to get the whole Adobe suite, and
Yeah.
I mean, I can't remember how much it is, but it's a lot of money.
It's a lot. Yeah.
So at the moment, I mean, now I've got the entire suite because it's free.
Yeah.
But before that, I was just paying for Lightroom and Photoshop because I'm a photographer, so I kind of need those things. But I
Yeah.
tried to outsource my other programs.
Yeah.
And when, like, I used to do a few kind of travel vlogs using Premiere,
Mm-hmm.
and I found it was probably very difficult because of the first video editing software I've used. Like, you know, I didn't go to iMovie first. I just went straight into Premiere, which was probably a bit silly. But it was very clunky, and the export times were quite long. And yeah, I found out that DaVinci was free and gave it a shot, and found out it was really easy to use. It rendered very quickly, and also, like, during the process of constructing your video with Premiere, I found that I wasn't able to play back the clips that I was putting in my video, or if I did, they were very laggy.
Yeah.
I mean, I could just get a better computer, but like, don't really
Yeah.
need it.
I get it. Yeah.
Whereas in DaVinci, it was all pretty seamless. So yeah, this was my, like, after I got DaVinci, I kind of stopped doing vlogs. So this is probably only my second time using it.
Mm-hmm. I see what you mean by showing the panels versus doing it this way. It was like a small segment. Like, it was really well done as opposed to someone showing their panels bit by bit. It was really good, really effective.
Thanks. Yeah, I was pretty happy with it. And yeah, it was a pretty good. I know I'm sure everybody else is the same, but this term, man, what a stitch up! like oh man, I was so excited. Like, I moved from Melbourne to Sydney to do my master's here, and it was like a big deal. And yeah, I was like, oh, crazy new university, everything's going great. And then, you know, week 4 or 5, like, everything went downhill. And I'd been doing like really well until that point, and at that point, yeah, I just lost all my motivation, and kind of went off track for a bit, and I couldn't really like understand the point of completing the studio. Like, it just didn't really seem like I'd get anything out of it. But then when I kind of thought about using video as an alternative medium and how you could kind of explore the power of that, it really did give me a lot of purpose for the studio, because I felt that by harnessing a different means of communication, that it would be something quite useful to show to, you know, future employers, etc., to show that you're adaptive to situations.
Yeah.
Because really, like, no matter what you do in architecture, it's all about communication.
Yeah. I guess from this, things will be different anyway. The way we present, even going back in person, there will probably be some form of online content carried forward, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Especially, like, I'm pretty sure we'll probably have to social distance, etc., on campus, and maybe it will be that you know, going to university is a bit more, I don't know, tiring than it would be normally, and probably more attractive to stay at home in some circumstances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when you can do your lectures in pajamas.
Not that I've ever done that. Cool. Well, I don't think anyone has any more questions. But yeah, thank you all for coming along, and hope you enjoyed the alternate tutorial / lecture.